Today we will go over what we call our trigonometric functions. So before I get started, let's hear some topics that I need to introduce first. First part we need to take care of is identifying parts of a right triangle. Given my angle here, we want to identify three parts. Which side is my hypotenuse? Which side is the opposite side? And which side is the adjacent side? So let's take a look. Hypotenuse in a right triangle is always the side that is opposite across from your right angle symbol. Right angles over here, which makes this my hypotenuse. So I will call this hypotenuse. Or H for short. Next up we have is the adjacent. Adjacent means touching. What side is my angle A over here touching? That's not the hypotenuse. So my angle is touching this side and touching this side, but this part is the hypotenuse, so we pick over here. This is called my adjacent side. And I'll call this A. And last up, opposite means the side that's away from the angle, the side that I'm not touching. So my opposite side is all the way over here. Opposite, and I'll call that O. So, adjacent, opposite, and hypotenuse is very important to identify when we go to our trig functions. Our trig functions is known as SohCahToa. SohCahToa is an acronym where O stands for opposite, A stands for adjacent, and H stands for hypotenuse. Alright, so let's go over these notes. SohCahToa are your three trig functions. We have what we call S, which stands for sine, C, which stands for cosine, and T, which stands for tangent. SohCahToa. Alright. Sine, cosine, and tangent are buttons on your calculator. Here's sine, let me zoom in a bit. Cosine and tangent. So these are ratios that use given sides. The sine function goes with your opposite side and hypotenuse side. The cosine function goes with the adjacent and the hypotenuse side. The tangent function goes with the opposite and the adjacent side. So here we go. I'll start over in this box. Let me include here, we're missing tangent ratio. Which is opposite over adjacent. Alright, I'll start down here. So first step is to always identify the angle. My angle's right here, I'm going to mark it down. There's my angle. I'll start with sine. In SohCahToa, sine starts with the S, so starts with the S. So sine is referring to so. Over here, tangent starts with a T, that's toa. And lastly, cosine starts with a C, that's ka. And right now you're probably wondering what the heck do these mean. So here we go. My angle A is over here. I next want to identify my sides. Hypotenuse, here's my right angle symbol, which makes this the hypotenuse. Over here, my angle's over here. The side that's away from the angle, I'm not touching it, it's on the far side, that's my opposite. And over here, the side that I'm touching, I'm right next to it, it's near me. This is adjacent. So we can fill these in. Sine, according to SohCahToa, is so, O and H. That means what goes over here is your opposite, 6 over your H, hypotenuse of 10. So sine of this angle is 6/10. Or, as a reduced fraction, that's 3/5. Tangent is TOA. We have O and A. O opposite 6, A adjacent 8. And as a reduced fraction, that is 3/4. Last but not least, cosine. Ka, C-A-H. That means we use A adjacent over H hypotenuse, which is a reduced fraction of 4/5. So there you have sine, cosine, tangent. And these come from here. Sine, S-O-H. So this is so. Cosine, we have a C, A adjacent, H hypotenuse, ka, and tangent. T, tangent, O opposite, A adjacent, TOA. SohCahToa. Alright, let's drop over here. This is supposed to be X. Find the value of X. So, first thing I want you to do again, mark my angle. Our angle's right here. Then, next, label our sides. Here's opposite, here's hypotenuse. Notice we have an O and an H. Looking at SohCahToa, what uses O and H? O and H, we're using so. The S in so stands for sine. Inside your sine is always the angle. So we have a sine 53 equals O, which is X, H is second, which is 12. So now we're solving for X. Over here to the side, let me make a note. So X on top, we multiply, and X on bottom, we divide. And here's what I mean by multiply and divide. Right here, my S is on top, it's a numerator. That means I multiply. What we multiply is you take the number from the fraction, that's a 12. 12 times it with your function, sine 53. Now it's a calculator question. Before we do anything else, go to mode. Under mode, make sure you are in degrees. We are working with degrees, so I want my calculator to use degrees. I want to stress this out because I know a lot of students want to do this, where they clear the memory. If you reset that calculator, that mode goes back to radian. Make sure we are in degrees. Okay, now that we're in degrees, I type this in, 12 times, sine is at the bottom, 53, to get my answer of 9.58. Instructions say route to the nearest 100, 2 decimal places. So what this tells you is in a right triangle with an angle of 53 degrees and a hypotenuse of 12, that means your opposite side is 9.58. Alright, let's drop down and finish up the rest of the problems. Alright, practice. Over here, this should be a 9. So here's my steps. First, identify your angle. Second, label your sides. That's adjacent and that's opposite. Using SohCahToa, we have an O and an A. O and A right here, so we're using TOA. So my equation is tangent. Inside my parentheses is the angle. Equals. O comes first, that goes on top. A comes second, that goes on the bottom. So tan 29 equals x over 9. X is on top, so we still multiply. 9 times tangent 29. 9 times tangent 29 is 4.99. Round to the nearest 100, 2 decimal places. Alright, moving on. So here's some sample problems. Let's finish the last two. Over here, my angle's over here. This is my opposite. This is my hypotenuse. So I have an O and an H. We're looking at SohCahToa. O and H are right here. That means I'm using S for sine. Sine, inside my parentheses is the angle, 34, equals opposite over hypotenuse. This time, x is in the denominator, x at the bottom. That means we divide. So x, I'm sorry, not x, but 9. So when we divide, you still use the number from the fraction. In the fraction, that's a 9. So use 9 divided by sine 34. Equals 16.09. And my last question over here, again, identify angles right here. We have a hypotenuse, we have an opposite. So opposite and hypotenuse is still sine. So we have sine, inside my parentheses is x, equals opposite 17 over hypotenuse 25. This time x is in the parentheses. So I'll make a note. X is the angle here. So to solve for x, it's not top or bottom anymore. What we use is what we call sine inverse. So originally, over here, you tell the calculator, I know one side, I know the angle, give me the other side. This time, we know one side, we know the other side. What we're missing is the angle. We are working backwards. And for my trig functions, we call that our inverse function. To get that, you press, note down here, second sine on a calculator gets us something that looks like this. So second and sine gives us a sine with a -1. That's called sine inverse. In your sine inverse, you type in your fraction. That's a 17 over 25. You're telling the calculator, hey, these are my two sides, give me the angle. So there you go, x equals 42.84. It said round to the nearest degree, nearest whole number, so x is 43 degrees. So what this tells you is if you have a right triangle where one leg is 17 and the hypotenuse is 25, one of those angles has to be 43 degrees, more or less. Alright, and there you have it, your 3 trigonometric functions, sine, cosine, tangent, or SohCahToa.